Hello and welcome to the Ty Brown Show. We are starting 2020 off in style with a very special guest. This guest is an ADR champion, and he's going to help you to know where to start when you find yourself stuck in a conflict. Our guest is Jeremy Pollack, and Jeremy is an anthropologist and conflict resolution consultant in Silicon Valley, working in several cities there in California, helping companies in myriad of ways work through the conflicts that are holding them back. Jeremy's an expert in the psychology and the social dynamics and the peacebuilding methodologies of interpersonal and intergroup conflict. He's an entrepreneur, a scholar, and dispute resolution royalty. Everyone put your hands together for Jeremy Pollack. Jeremy, thanks for being here with us.
Hey, thanks, Ty. Appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. For those who might be new to the show, the purpose that this podcast was created was to bring the benefits of alternative dispute resolution to the masses, to everyone in everyday sort of situations, help people disagree better and interact with a little bit less stress. Really, we want people to be confident when they are faced with a difficult conversation and just feel a little more comfortable when conflict arises. So those are some of the main purposes. And one thing we talk about a lot on this show is contempt and the amount of contempt that people feel towards others. And we are trying real hard to prevent that in our communities and to promote just a little more love. So that is the purpose of the show. Our show, we always start off with a little story. That's how we do most of our learning here. And we use this Stop Hitting Yourself segment to demonstrate how a lot of our conflicts are sort of self-inflicted. We have a tendency to elicit the behavior in others that's actually annoying us to begin with. So, Jeremy, I wanted to just ask you, in your experience dealing with lots of conflicts and lots of situations, do you ever see this sort of counterproductive effort where we end up sort of hitting ourselves when we're in conflict?
Well, yeah, I mean, one thing that I was thinking about this question, and one thing that dawns on me is a very common communication dichotomy that I see both like between intimate partners as well as between business partners. And it's usually when there's one of the partners or one of the parties has a softer style and is more of an abstract thinker, and they communicate in more abstract ways or a little bit more around the point instead of direct at it. And sorry, I'm coming off of a cold, so I've got a little cough thing. But
oh, we get it. You're good.
And then the other party is a lot of times a much more direct speaker. They're very left brain. They're very logical, and that dichotomy seems to create this strange communication dynamic where the logical one or the direct communicator, they talk in a manner that feels like an attack to the other because the other is a little bit softer, and the one that's feeling attacked starts to shut down and get smaller. And when she or he does that, the other person feels like he's not being listened to, and so he increases the amount of his communication, the intensity of it, and the other person in turn shrinks down even more, and this cycle continues. So they're eliciting the response of each other that they don't want. That's what I thought about when you asked me that question.
Yeah, you explained that so well. And so I wanted to share with you, Jeremy, a story that happened just recently. And I want you to see if you're able to kind of give us an analysis of what you just described happening here in this story. So I live in this neighborhood that gets a lot of snow. We're at the base of the mountains, and we just get hammered every storm. Lots of snow. And it just so happens that our street, it has a hill coming down towards our house on one side and a hill coming down to our house on the other side. So the street that goes in front of our house is like a trough. Mm-hmm. And in this trough, many enter, but few will leave. During a snowstorm, it is the Bermuda Triangle of snow driving. And so we often go out front and we just help cars that slide off the road into our driveway.
Oh, wow.
And it just happens. It happens every storm. And our mailbox has been knocked over at least 6 times. In fact, it's no longer even stuck in the ground. We keep it in this cinder block. So if it gets knocked, it just falls over.
Oh my
Okay,
gosh.
so that's the setting. Okay.
Okay.
So big storm. We've got all 4 of my little kids. They're all sitting out. They're actually sledding down my driveway. And this older couple, they come driving down the road. They go into the trough and they slide off the road into our mailbox.
Right.
Okay, so there they are. They're stuck. Kind of an older couple. Okay, and the husband gets out, and he doesn't want our help. Not at all. He doesn't want to talk to us. He's mad that he's stuck. Probably feeling self-conscious that he got stuck in the first place. And so he asks his wife to get in the driver's seat, and she kind of resists this. And I can tell probably the reason why she's resisting this is because she doesn't want the pressure of driving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
she's
so,
going to get yelled at if she doesn't do it right or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that ended up being true. So she reluctantly gets in the driver's seat, and he's trying to push the car. And as soon as, and he's got the window unrolled, and he's like, all right, push the gas. And she pushes the gas, and the tires start spinning, and the car just slides further off the road. And he says, stop. And she stops, and he goes, why didn't you listen to me? And, and she's like, oh, I'd never wanted to do this in the first place.
She knew it was going to become her fault.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so the husband continues to bark. He's just barking orders at her. Okay, no, easy this time. No, okay, now go, and she's trying, and inevitably after a few seconds of every attempt, she just puts on the brakes and she says, I'm not doing this. And she's mad at him, and he's mad at her that she's not doing this. And eventually this thing gets resolved because my 5-year-old son, actually he's 6. It's hard to keep them straight. My 6-year-old son, who's just watching this unfold, he says to the guy, he says, your instructions are hard to follow. And then he walked up to the car, and he says to the woman, and he says, but you still need to try.
Wow. What a mediator.
It was amazing. It was amazing. So this was my son, Griffin. So that's kind of how it was resolved. But I want to now just go back for a second, and starting kind of from the perspective of the husband. Okay.
Yeah.
What did he perceive was his wife's response? And then how did he react because of what he was seeing her do? And then we're going to kind of talk about the reverse of how she interpreted his behaviors and how she reacted as a result. So I know that was like a really complicated way to set this up, but do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I don't, so the way, I mean, just off the top of my head, I look at when people are in a state where they're having trouble communicating, they're usually in a place of pain. And so his pain was potentially, insecurity or self-consciousness, or anger at himself or embarrassment of some sort. Right.
Right.
And when you're in that, when you're in that state, it's super hard to communicate effectively with anyone else. And she could tell he was in that state. She knows her husband well enough to know he's in that state, and this isn't going to go well for me.
That is such a good insight. Yeah. Yes.
So I mean, he set up the dynamic. If she's not in a place where she's able to be what I would call generous with her heart, knowing that he's in a place of pain, and that when he says stuff and yells and whatever, it's not because of her. But if she takes it personally and internalizes it, there's going to be a communication breakdown, and no one's going to get anything done. So one of them would have to be the quote unquote bigger person and say that she or he is in a place of pain, and I need to be more generous and open with myself and calm down and be more self-aware. And that kind of
thing. Yeah. And ultimately the child was able to get them both there.
When your son said that, did they actually like hear him and go, "Whoa, wait a minute, the little kid knows," calm down?
They were embarrassed. In fact, at that point, that's when I came over and I said, "Can I help you out?" And he said, yeah, I'll pay you something if you can get me out of this.
Oh.
And I said, well, that won't be necessary. Right.
Yeah.
And so at that point I started pushing with him. And because I know the street, I was kind of telling them the tricks of getting out of this spot. And oddly enough, as we're doing this, a snowplow came by and cleared the road, so they were able to get back on their way pretty easily.
Yeah.
But it totally snapped them out of it. Yeah, it totally did.
Well, the one thing that I would think that if I were to approach them and like say, hey, could you want some help, is just to like make it clear that, hey, this happens to everyone, not just you.
Right.
So like he understands that he's not some idiot that this happened to. This is just a common thing, and he has nothing to be embarrassed about.
Yeah, and I totally should have led with that. And I didn't. I just came over and I was like, looks like you need some help, which is like the worst thing you could say.
Right. No, I don't need any help.
Yeah, and that's what he said. He goes,
fine.
oh, we're fine. We're not even really stuck yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true though. And I don't know why, like I study this and I do this for a living, and like I still mess things up all the time.
Yeah, of course.
But that's a great, it's just so true though. Like it's so easy to kind of forget the mental space someone might be occupying in a time like this,
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, and there's advantages and disadvantages to being an outsider, not because his wife at that moment knows her husband well enough probably to know how he's going to be affected. And so before even interacting with him on this, she already quit. She already said, I'm not even going to deal with it, right? But if there's a tool for her to use potentially and go, wait, I know this is going to trigger my husband. I know he's going to be in the state. I don't want to be in the fight with him. So I'm going to allow him to express himself. Even though he might be yelling at me, I know it's not about me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And,
it's tough. It's tough.
It is tough. And it's funny because I think, for her, she sees her husband, she sees all the signs that he's probably going to be difficult to work with right now.
Yeah.
She knows that, she sees that. And so it's interesting because her response to that was, well, I'm going to kind of shut down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put myself in the vulnerable position of being barked at over this, Right. And so, but it's funny because as she withdrew more, he became more incessant with his orders.
That's exactly what happens, right? Because he doesn't feel like he's getting heard and listened to.
Right.
So he's got to be louder and more intense to get listened to. And the more he does that, the more she's going to shut down.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And she's trying to send signals that, hey, this isn't working. You're going to have to change your approach here. And he's not picking up the right signal.
Boy, oh boy. I just was in a mediation, a few days ago, and it's just very clear to me. And it's like one person was extremely incessant and repeating himself, going over and over and over. And the other individual just couldn't interact, and he started to go and shrink down. And the more the guy was talking at him, the more he literally his whole body went like this. And
really?
He kept shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And I could see it, and I had to stop and I had to say, listen, you're repeating. Can you see what's happening here to your partner? Look at him,
yes.
Let's get back to an even playing field. Yeah, it was really interesting.
Yeah, that's such a great example. But yes, thank you. I think that will wrap up our Stop Hitting Yourself segment. Thank you for the analysis there. And listeners, keep in mind, you're going to find yourself in these kinds of cycles. And think about what Jeremy was saying here. We see this all the time. I mean, it's a really common element of a lot of conflicts, and you've got to stop the cycle using the strategies we just discussed. Okay, so let's go ahead and just dive into a little bit more about you and your background, Jeremy. And I'm hoping that as we talk, people might find I guess some tools and also the courage to go ahead and do a little better with their interpersonal and maybe even their group conflicts that they might be part of. So what inspired you to get into this field of dispute resolution?
So I'm a lifelong martial artist, and so I had always been interested in this idea of what can most quickly resolve conflict. And coming from martial arts practice, I had good teachers, so it was very much this idea that the physical sort of resolution is always a very last resort. and how do we resolve things more peacefully? How do we stay humble and
Mm.
stay confident at the same time and be compassionate and that kind of thing? And so that was a really interesting concept to me. And eventually it led me into studying anthropology. And I was very interested when I did graduate school for anthropology. It was studying group dynamics and how groups cooperate with each other. And that led me into becoming very interested in just, general, like, what is the psychology of group conflict and of conflict in general? How do people get along? And simultaneously, when I was in grad school, I was at a private coaching practice. And so, and I started to get requests from my clients to help mediate some relationship problems between them and some of their business partners a lot of times. And so even sometimes they're partners. So that all kind of led me into, okay, well, maybe I want to study this in a more applied fashion. And then I went to graduate school for conflict resolution and peace building. And so I started using that more as on the ground tools and methods to helping people actually get out of conflict. So starting from the psychology of it and then moving into like actually techniques to get out of it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's kind of how the trajectory of my interest went.
I loved hearing about your martial arts background and how that that dovetailed really with this peace building effort that you're engaged in now.
It's I think people see that as mutually exclusive. Like, how does martial arts factor into, to peace building? But I've had lots of interesting discussions about this, and I think there's a lot of intersection there, because I think I do believe that in order to be a person that can successfully resolve conflicts peacefully, you have to have enough confidence and security within yourself to hold a safe space for other people's feelings and emotions when they come out, and not to be so defensive and feel like you're being attacked and stuff like that.
Right.
And if you don't have a strong sense of self or strong sense of confidence that you can hold your own space and you're confident in yourself, your defenses can go up much more quickly. And so I think learning to be confident and learning to be humble, and at the same time, it lends that mindset of a true martial artist, not someone who's like a tough guy or something. That mindset kind of lends itself to a peace builder's mindset.
Excellent. I loved some of those descriptors you used, humility and confidence, which sometimes are viewed as almost opposing, but they're not, right? That'd be a misunderstanding to say that.
Confidence without arrogance, So like staying humble, but being confident can lead to being kind, essentially.
Right. Yes. It does breed compassion. If you are able to possess both confidence and humility, you're in a position where you can be compassionate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, that's excellent background on that. And thanks for sharing. In fact, a couple of side notes. I understand you've actually opened and run a number of martial arts studios. Is that right?
Yeah. I owned martial arts studios in Los Angeles when I lived there, and then I sold them in 2012.
Okay. Well, excellent. So all you listeners out there in California, go learn martial arts, and just maybe you too can be great.
Yeah. Just make sure you have the right teacher who teaches you humility, not just how to beat people up or something.
What's the name of the studio that you had going, or a group of studios, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, my company was called Academy of Mixed Martial Science. That was what it was called. Yeah. And now it's transformed into another company. They bought it and they named it something new. But
okay. And I forgot to even say this, but Jeremy, he's the founder of Pollack Peacebuilding Systems. And I was hoping you could give us just kind of a little blurb about what Pollack Peacebuilding Systems does for businesses. I know we have lots of business people listening to this podcast, so maybe you can share what you guys do and how to reach out if there's any interest there.
Yeah. I mean, we help companies navigate challenging interpersonal situations, as well as optimize culture, and then we help train employees too. So we have three main services. One is acute conflict resolution, which we call our peacemaking service, which is 2 or 3 people aren't getting along. We come in there and we help. We act as transformative mediators. So we help to try to rebuild the relationship by getting at what's underlying the conflicts, and the challenges, and helping to figure out, okay, so how can we solve some of this stuff and get through and make an agreement to have better relationships, and what kind of steps need to happen. The second one is culture optimization and intervention. So if there's a larger number of people, or just the department or the company as a whole, no one's getting along, there's low morale, high turnover, that kind of stuff, come in and do an assessment. We usually facilitate a dialogue based on the results of the assessment and try to figure out, what people think about the assessment and solutions. And then we offer a bunch of interventions that we actually carry out ourselves, coaching, training, consulting, facilitating meetings, that kind of stuff. And then the third thing we do is training. So we do communications training, conflict resolution skills training, mediation skills training.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good summary. So now going into your practitioner mindset here.
Yeah.
When you get involved in resolving, in this case, let's call it one of those acute conflict resolution needs. And if it's interpersonal, because that's probably the most everyday sort of circumstance our listeners would be encountered with, where do you start when resolving an interpersonal conflict that's gotten serious?
Well, do you mean like, so personally, and this is something that is part of the sort of training, is I think what's important is having the correct mindset as a peace builder. And if you are in a conflict, for instance, when I train people, I train them to try to think of, if you want to resolve this conflict peacefully, if you don't want to fight, you have to make a decision whether you want to fight or resolve peacefully. So sometimes the right strategy is to try to dominate, but in the strategy that you choose when you want to resolve peacefully, then you have to have a particular mindset. And I use a very simple acronym CAN, which is curiosity, alliance, and needs awareness. And that's my mindset. So I want to stay very curious. So I'm coming in, and if I'm curious, it means that I don't have all the information yet. Even though I might have heard the story, I don't have all the information, and I really need to listen to everybody who's involved individually and consider what they're saying, and be really present and interested in what they're saying. And that's how I stay curious, so that I can learn each person's perspective and their story and where they're at. The next thing is alliance. So I want to make sure that everyone knows I'm on their team. And so if I'm in a conflict, for instance, and I come in and someone comes to me and says, I have a problem with you, and they want to tell me their problem with me and that kind of stuff, I have to stay, if I want to be in a peace builder's mindset, I have to stay curious. And I want to get into a feeling of being an ally with them, not I'm the problem, but they're the problem. I want to be on your team. Right. And then the third part is needs awareness. And I want to make sure that I stay aware when I'm listening to what their story is and what's going on for them. And I'm trying to help them understand that I'm on their team. I want to make sure that I'm aware of their needs. So there's underlying interests or underlying needs that are motivating the conflict. And I want to make sure that what underlying core need is being affected here.
Yeah. What are some examples of needs that you have to be mindful of?
Yeah. I mean, I tend to list 4 needs that are important, especially for the workplace. Those would be respect, identity, safety, and control. So those 4 needs have to be satisfied to a particular level, or else people just aren't going to be happy, and it's going to lead to conflict. So, so I'm asking myself, what is going on for this person? What's going on? Do they feel disrespected in some level? Do they feel like essentially that they don't matter to someone, or do they feel that their identity is being threatened, that whether they're
incompetent
or incompetence or whatever they identify with, is that being threatened in some way or impeded in some way? Do they feel unsafe, or do they feel that they don't have any control over their situation? They have no impact or influence over their work situation or their life situation. Like, what's going on for them? And it could be all 4.
Right.
So I just want, if I understand the need, then I can start to help problem solve creatively to get the need filled without necessarily adhering to the desire that or the position that they've come up with. Like someone says, I want more X in the conference room, or because whatever. And I if I can get to the need, why do they want that? Why do they want it? And if I can get to that, then I might go, well, we can't give you X, but we can probably give you Y. that would work for the company and for us, and that would also solve your need. Would that work? So there's there's lots of different examples that I'm
Right.
not coming up with off the fly here, but like that, it helps to understand.
It helps so much. And it makes it a lot easier to be on the same team if you can stay needs focused, because otherwise you're at an impasse, and it's hard, when you feel like someone doesn't understand your needs, even if you're not doing a good job making them explicit, you still feel you feel a certain level of, I guess, adversity, or you're just, if you're not understood by someone, it's hard to remember you're on the same team, even if it's obvious that you are, even like a marriage.
And a lot of people in conflict, when they're triggered emotionally, they feel alone.
Yeah.
They feel like they're all alone in this thing. And so if they're not getting heard, if they don't feel like their need is getting met, they're not getting heard, their voice isn't getting met, they're just still alone. So the moment that they feel like, well, this person is really, that's why we do like reflecting or reframing to reflecting someone back, like acknowledging what they just said so that they understand. Because if I hear that, oh, this person's actually really getting where I'm at.
Right.
They can sense what I'm feeling. They can sense what I'm needing. Then I'm not so alone anymore. And that a lot of times lowers people's defenses.
Right. Yes. Excellent. Well said. Guys, I wonder where we've heard before that mindset is a good place to start. It's almost like there must be something true to that, because every expert we've ever had here agrees that mindset is pretty much always the place to start if you find yourself in conflict. So go ahead and do that, guys. Okay. So while we're on it, I'm curious to get from your perspective, what are some of the more common communication failures that you encounter, that you see, actually playing out in businesses and elsewhere?
Yeah. Well, the one we talked about earlier with just that dichotomy is a very common one.
Right? Yeah.
Like differences in communication styles is definitely a big one where it breaks down. But I think piggybacking on what we were just talking about, when people are in a conflict mindset, in other words, they're triggered in some way, they're emotionally fired up, their fight or flight sort of mechanisms have been activated, it's very hard to communicate. And a lot of times when your defenses are up, people, they perceive that the other is intending harm. And this is where communication starts breaking down a lot. People making assumptions about the other person's intentions. And so I would just say, like, try your best to remember, if you have some techniques to like help yourself get out of an emotional state, that's number one. Like, stop, breathe, remove yourself from the situation if you need to. You cannot communicate if you're in defense mode. It just won't happen. It won't be effective, right? If you can get out of defense mode, can you get to a place where you start remembering that this person might not be intending to harm me. This person might not be intending to just completely neglect me. They might not be doing this maliciously. But if I'm in a reactionary state, then a lot of times that assumption becomes true, and communication just completely breaks down.
Yeah, that is such an important point to make. And I see that a lot. I see that a lot in my work as well. In fact, it reminds me of this instance just recently with a guy who was getting a little bit of negative feedback from his boss. And the feedback, it was negative because he had made a mistake. And it was funny because after getting this feedback, this relationship that had been pretty good up until then, for years, in fact, just started deteriorating. And it was because he got stuck in reaction mindset mode, right? And what he needed to realize was, what, I did make a mistake. And yeah, it's the boss's job to make sure I learn from it. And that's fine. Yeah. He still knows that I'm a stud and that I'm good at this job. But he wasn't thinking like that. It was just defense. I need to prove that I'm better. And in fact, the boss shouldn't have said that about me because he doesn't know anything about my job, right? Like,
Well, is the boss also giving compliments when warranted too? Like, is that?
Who knows? I probably not enough.
Yeah, because one thing is, like, people have confirmation bias. So A lot of times they're going to have selective perception about what is coming in and what's not. So like if they feel like, oh, the boss is out to get me, and then all of a sudden there's 5 instances of interaction. 3 of them are negative and 2 of them are positive. A lot of times the person will just confirm their own bias and say, they won't even think about the 2. They'll just think about the 3 that confirms this guy's out to get me, right?
Right.
So that could be happening, or it could be true that the boss isn't doing a good job of actually giving enough positive feedback so that every time there's an interaction, it's all about what you're doing wrong. And that's not a good place either. That requires some leadership training.
Exactly. So call Jeremy if that's you, guys. All right. So if people only remember just one thing from listening today, what would you hope that they would grasp and take from you, given just all that you've learned doing this over the years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I always, if there's only one thing that I try to impart to anyone in any training or anything, it's remember that everyone needs to feel they matter. That's all. If you are ever find yourself in a conflict, or if you're at work or whatever, and people start to get heated or whatever, just remember, everyone needs to know they matter. Listen, so like they need to feel listened to, they need to feel heard, they need to feel attended to. Take time for them. Be generous with your time. Be generous with your heart. They need to feel that they matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, lightning round time. This is just so people can get to know you a little bit better on maybe a little bit different level.
All right.
So, Jeremy, did you make any New Year's resolutions?
I tend not to do resolutions because I try. But there's one that I thought about that I just want to put intention on, is just being more present in my personal life, because I'm very present in my work life, because when I'm working as a consultant, you have to be present, you have to pay attention. But my work life with my wife and with my family, and just staying present, not thinking about work when I'm not at work.
Yeah,
stuff, so.
Totally. It's so funny you say that, because I was telling my wife, I try to make goals, regularly, not just once a year, but I do always pick a theme, like a personal theme.
Yeah.
And I was telling her, kind of what my hope was for this year, and it was to be present. And so she was helping me develop this into a theme of just be here, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe we were cut out of the same cloth here.
Yeah, be here now. I like that one.
Yeah. And hers is simplify, because we have too many toys in the house.
I like that too.
Yeah.
You know what? That's part of my, I have a feeling that's going to be part of my year too.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyway, there's a lot that can be said about simplify. Yeah. Okay. If you could go on vacation anywhere in the world right now, where would you go and who would you take?
I'd go with my wife to Tokyo.
Tokyo? Why Tokyo?
I just have long had an urge to go there. I think it looks very interesting. So
yeah. Everyone I've heard of who's traveled to Tokyo has always come back trying to make me feel envious of them.
Oh yeah.
So there must be something to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And true or false, you watched at least one Hallmark Christmas movie this last Christmas?
So
uh-oh.
So I don't know about
some
Hallmark.
Hesitation.
I watched Love Actually. I don't know if that counts as a Hallmark.
I don't actually think that truly qualifies.
But. Okay, yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I haven't watched an actual Hallmark.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming and sharing some of your insight and help. It is a big deal to have some tools that can help us to interact with people better. It makes life a lot more enjoyable, and we wish you the best in your work and hope that you can just continue making the world a better place by resolving conflict, one business at a time.
Amen.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. And until next time, this has been the Ty Brown Show, and we'll get you next time. All right. I'm going to